Welcome, everybody. My name is Jordan Betancourt. I'm the Membership and Program Manager at NICSA, which is an association that services the global asset management industry. And in addition to that, I'm also a member of the Young Professionals Advisory Committee. So I'm pleased to be joined here with a few of my fellow and former committee colleagues who will be our panelists for today. Hopefully, as my opening comments will allude to, I'm moderating today's session, so hopefully you'll hear from me as little as possible once we get going, and we'll hear from our esteemed panel. The title of the program today is How to Live Your Life and Work Too. And I just wanted to flag something, as I reviewed the description of the program, one of the key points that stuck out to me is defining what a healthy environment is for you and how to achieve that. And I just thought that was really important to flag, because that healthy environment is going to look different and feel different to everybody. So we need a lot of different perspectives to help you achieve that. So to help, we have three great panelists with us today: Jen McCadden, Tom Cote, and Natasha Bethea, who I'll have to introduce themselves in a moment. But I did also just want to put a quick plug out to the audience that while we do have plenty of questions today planned, we welcome audience participation, and we'll definitely do our best to weave those in throughout the program as well too. So with that, let's go ahead and do introductions. And Jen, would you mind kicking us off for that?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen McCadden. I'm also on the Young Professionals Committee with Jordan. I am a senior associate at Association Management Strategies. Primarily there, I do operations work. I'm the director of operations for an organization called AHOU, which is Insurance Underwriters, and also the director of administration for an organization, ABWM, which is the American Board of Wound Management, and they do credentialing. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today, and please send any questions that you have for us in the chat.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. Tom, you want to go next?
Happy to. Thanks, Jordan. My name is Tom Cote. I'm in Albany, New York. And recently, actually during the pandemic, I started my own company. So I'm president and CEO of Next Gen Management. And in my role there, I serve as executive director of the New York State Optometric Association, the American Association of University and College Counseling Center Directors, the Suffolk County Psychological Association, and the New England College of Osteopathic and Occupational and Environmental Medicine. Also do some, consulting work and strategic plans and things like that. So I'm really happy to be here because I sort of fell into this topic just by saying yes to so many things in my 20s. And all of a sudden I was really sort of overburdened and felt like I needed to figure out how to balance this. And then it just became part of what I talked about with all of my colleagues. And so this was just a good fit for me. I'm also the past chair of the Young Professionals Committee and a Delp Scholar at ASCE. So thanks again for having me.
Great. Thanks so much, Tom. And Natasha, want to bring us home?
Yes, thank you, Jordan. And I'm glad to be here. My name is Natasha Bethea. I am the Director of Marketing and Membership at the Information Technology Industry Council. And we are the trade association representing the tech industry. So I'm sure you are familiar with a lot of our members: Google, Apple, Microsoft. And I am happy to be here today because like my colleagues have said, this past year has been crazy. And I'm a new mom, and actually we're all new parents here. And just finding myself throughout that journey has been a challenge, and it's still evolving. So I'm looking forward to talk about that today in this panel. I'm also a former YP committee member and a Delp Scholar.
Awesome. Great. Well, just one clarification. I am not a new parent, but I can empathize with our new parents on the panel. So hopefully my girlfriend is not listening to this. So we'll kick it off with just, a question will go to all of you. What have you learned today, over the last year in regards to preserving overall wellness? And this, you'll notice it's the same question we gave to the attendees. So it would be great. Natasha, you want to kick us off with that?
Sure. Well, this past year, I've learned that life is short. With the pandemic and just seeing all the things that have happened in the news in 2020, you really have to appreciate life and what's going on, because you're never sure if you're going to get the next day. So instead of spending time stressed and, trying to figure out what's next, I really try to value each day. And it starts with just being positive, waking up with a positive attitude and not putting too much on yourself. So I think this year has really, shown me to be grateful and appreciate every moment that I get.
That's great. Thanks, Natasha. And Tom, you want to go next?
I have to piggyback on what Natasha said. It was a time to reflect a lot on the present and being mindful. And we've all heard that before, and that's all very, very important. Being a new parent, being home during the pandemic was sort of a blessing in a way, in terms of not missing any of my son's firsts and being there to watch him develop. So that was a blessing. But in terms of what I've learned, at least during the pandemic, was that I really needed to forge my own reality and create my own reality in terms of what I was doing for work and what I could do to make sure that I felt valuable where I was. And so that's really what prompted me to start my own company. But in addition to that, I think one of the things we tend to forget is that work doesn't own us. If you should look at yourself as an asset to where you work, not as a cog in a wheel. And if you feel that way where you work, you probably should find somewhere else to work. And because what I did on my 5-minute presentation earlier was, you need to vet your employer and make sure that they're treating you as a part of the team and as an asset, not as just something to make money. And so that piece of feeling valuable, I think, really tentacles out to a lot of other places in your life to feel satisfied. Because if your work really supports your life, you're going to be a lot more motivated and loyal to your work. And then this concept, and I don't mean to steal your thunder, Jen, but this power of no. There was a lot of things during the pandemic that you're asked to do or asked to participate in, and we're all zoomed out, and we were really sort of trying to pivot really quickly in such a drastic way. But it's okay to say no, and it's okay to focus on yourself a little bit. You should not feel guilty for it, and don't let your parents or anyone older than us feel or make you feel otherwise, because we are the ones that are forging our future and forging what the workforce is going to look like. So I think it's really important for us to create that space.
Thanks, Tom. No, and I always like to highlight the irony of Zoom fatigue on a Zoom call. So
True.
gotta love that. So
Yeah.
we could no, but I think that your comments are spot on, Tom, and Jen. I think that was a good segue to you.
Yes, and I think Natasha and Tom both touched on also what was a big impact to me this year. And I want to thank Tom for the title of my 5-minute video because it just encapsulated what I was going to talk about so perfectly. Really knowing how to set those boundaries and learning how to stick to them, especially as a new mom. You want to be great at everything, and you can't necessarily do that when you're trying to be everything to everyone. And so really taking that time to reflect and giving yourself the space and the grace to make mistakes. Maybe you put too much in one basket, not feeling guilty about kind of doing that. And really the reflection part is key, and knowing that what you're doing today for your wellness and for your self-care may not work tomorrow. And just being able to pivot and kind of let go and try new things has been really important over the past year.
Great, thanks, Jen. No, totally agreed. And now we're gonna change topics a little bit. It's now that we're starting to transition back to the office in some places. How can you maintain the flexibility of routines now that you set up in your day-to-day lives? I'll just start really quickly that my organization actually does not have an office anymore. We will never have an office again, and so I know we're probably a little bit unique there, but I know there's a million different hybrid models and coming back to the office. So I'm really curious to hear what you all have to say. So Jen, you want to kick us off there?
Absolutely. And really picking up from my last comment is that reflection is key about trying to figure out and navigate how to re-enter the world post-pandemic. What I've taken some time to think through is what worked, what part of the flexibility really worked for my schedule, especially with the new family and everything, And then what was just a Band-Aid to get through the past year and, do the best you can, but it's probably not a long-term solution. And, really taking the time to investigate different possibilities. So our office is still figuring out what we're going to do, but we have decided that we are all called remote workers moving forward. And what doesn't work for me is I'm fortunate enough that my childcare happens in my house, which is great. I don't have to go anywhere. I have a nice safe spot. I can focus on work 8 hours a day. The downside of that is I go from being an employee to a mom and a wife in 3 steps. And that is just kind of like a whiplash turnaround. And everyone has a day that bleeds past those 8 hours. And really setting up those boundaries has been difficult. So what we've done is looked into daycares. And so when we go back to the real world in July, August, we'll enroll my daughter in the daycare where there's some physical separation, which will be a different thing, but hopefully will provide that me time, Natasha, that you were talking about. That is sometimes really hard to come by, especially in 3 steps.
And Jordan, can I jump in here?
Yeah.
I just wanted to share because daycare has been amazing. So Jennifer, please just go for it. But I wanted to share that communication is definitely key when sticking to your flexibility schedule. I think the good thing about my job is my team, they understand that, I'm a new mom. I have these other priorities going on now, and we're all kind of in the same space. So, even my boss will tell me sometimes, do you need to take a break? Just take a break. So it's really good just to have that support. And just talking about taking breaks. Before, when I was working in the office, I would just work straight through, no breaks at all. But now, I take the time to, get out, take a walk. And when I go in the office, I plan to do the same thing, get some fresh air, because it's just so important. And then just sticking on a routine. So it took me a while to figure out what that routine would be for me. But I find that when I wake up early in the morning, when I get my workout in, I have so much energy and I can push through. So just making that a priority and being disciplined about it will really help with my flexibility. But, the main thing for me is just the communication, making sure that you're communicating to your organization what you need to be successful. And, as Tom said, vet the organization before you jump into some new situation to make sure that they are on board with how you want to live your life and how you want to work.
Couldn't agree more. And I'll just add that work, I heard this phrase from, I gave a reference for a colleague for a job, and that my colleague really wanted, he just had twins, he and his wife just had twins, and he really wanted a flexible remote work situation. And he almost wanted me to advocate for him during the reference. And the employer said, "We believe work is an activity, not a location." And I really loved that phrase because it couldn't be more true. Now, of course, there are people that have to sit at a front desk and greet people when they come in, and there are phones that need to be answered during certain times. But I would venture to guess that a lot of us that are probably on this call, a lot of associations, you have a job description and you just have to get that job done. And so what I've created in terms of me and the work that I do is, if I have a client that wants to work hourly, I won't do it. I want a scope of work that is required of me, and I want to be able to do it on my time. Of course, I will make meetings, and I will make sure my schedule fixes to that. But I'm going to get a job done for you, and I'm going to get it done very well. But in terms of being remote, this is my office. This is also my business, and I'm in the office in my house. And I'm likely going to hire a couple people in the next 6 to 12 months. They're going to be anywhere they want to live in the country, and they're going to be on a scope of work, not hours. Because the truth is that's the future of work. The gig economy is everything now. You should be really, really good at a handful of things. You don't have to be moderately good at a lot of things, because you can actually provide a lot more value in that sense. I know I'm very good at a few things. I'm good at being an executive director. I'm good at working with boards. So that's the type of work that I'm putting out there. And so I kind of feel like if your employer isn't sort of looking at it that way, and they think a butt in a chair, it means dollars in their pocket. think there's a very archaic and unfortunately overly traditional way of managing that you're probably going to see, and it's probably not going to match what you want. In terms of, I don't know how many of us are new parents, but I don't want to focus on the parenting stuff so much, but I'm lucky that my mother-in-law is truly a saint. And we just bought a house a couple months ago that has an in-law apartment. So my daycare is also in my house. But I actually love the fact that on my breaks, I can go down and play with my son. And my nephew's here a couple of days a week too. So I could be Uncle Tom and Dada at the same time, like it is today. And 4 o'clock is usually a working hour, but from 4 to 5, we're out on a walk or we're outside or we're playing. And I'll take that hour and I'll work after my kid goes to bed later on at night, because I just want to be able to focus on that time. I think about, if my kid was at daycare or later on when my kid is at school, I almost have the same amount of hours with him per week as he does at school. It's like you think of like your work friends, like you spend almost more time with them than you do with your family. And family is just so important and should be a priority that you have to figure out a way to make that balance. So in terms of being remote, I really do think that it's the way of the future. And I know a few groups that have already gone back full time, and there's been a mutiny among their staff because they've said, we've been completely productive. Not one member complaint, not one client complaint. Why are we forced to come back? Because we've proven that it works. And so you really should take a look at how your employer is reviewing that policy or reviewing the move back to the office and see what the real intentions are and the motivations are. So of course, traditional work environments are fine if you're perfectly fine with it. But, I push back on that a little bit because it could just be a little archaic.
No, that's great, Tom. And I do think that, especially as we go the next couple months, it's going to transition pretty quickly from, maintaining current staff to having to recruit new staff, and, just how the hiring cycle goes. And, for companies are going to need to be, competitive there. So it's going to be, ultimately getting the best employees. So I think your comments are totally on there. Mm-hmm. And so, we'll transition a little bit. And I know Tom teed this topic up a little bit earlier, the stigma of saying no as a YP. And Tom, I'm going to hand it right back to you. And so how do we remove that stigma of saying no as a YP?
Well, I said yes to everything in my 20s. And when I was in my 20s, and it's still really the case today, it's everyone wants the millennial point of view. Everyone wants to hear what young people are thinking, because we're the next generation of that intellectual capital and the collective wisdom of our associations. And now it's even younger than us, right? And some of us on the call might be even that Gen Z category. And so, I think it's okay to say yes when you have the time and the space for it in your life. And saying yes to things changed the trajectory of my career. So I don't want to advocate so much for saying no to everything, but find a mentor, talk to people that have been through it, and see what it was that was most effective when they said yes. Perhaps there's a lot of things they said yes to that were a waste of their time or didn't really bring them any learning experiences. So I think there's power in that, but the level of self-care, especially now with the slow removal of stigma around mental illness and stress and, schedules being too packed and, busy isn't a badge of honor anymore. And so I think it's something that we can consider saying, I'm going to fit this in for the next 3 months, and then I will pivot to something else, or I will change to something else. So if you don't have that self-care time, and you don't have time for, perhaps you're a newlywed and all of a sudden you're saying yes to everything at work and your marriage falls apart, or you just had a kid and you're not the type of parent you wanted to be, or you're in a job that you might not like, so you want to volunteer for something different just to get that experience. So I think it's a little bit being more strategic about what you say yes to. And when you're young and you're new to an industry or new to a career, you don't really know what that is. So I would say find a mentor, talk to people, see really what their most effective and strategic yeses were, and work from there.
And Tom, I couldn't agree more. I love the idea of almost like crowdsourcing and figuring out other people's experiences. Like you, in my 20s, even in my 30s, I love learning new things, hands down. You give me an opportunity, I will usually sign myself up for it. As I get older, I'm getting better at kind of recognizing, okay, my plate is a little bit too full right now, because while you learn a lot, you can burn out, and that burnout, it hurts your career trajectory long term, and it's not fun to bounce back from. So when you do say no, because all of us have probably encountered someone who's our age or new to the workforce who is saying no very confidently, but is saying no so often that it's kind of creating it helps kind of reinforce the stereotype that, no, we don't want to do something. So say yes. There's something you just kind of have to say yes to, but I am always a big fan of having some rationale to back up why I'm going to say no. It helps me feel better and more confident in saying it. And it also gives me a chance not to just kind of say yes and a week later go, oh my gosh, there's too much on my plate. So you have to kind of work through it. There are some people, even if you say no and you have reasons, some who have been in the industry for a while, they may push back and think that, oh, you're just saying no because you're young. You kind of have to work through those issues. There is no perfect solution for that, but just know that stick to your guns.
Yeah, and I just want to share one final point on that. I think, and many of us might experience this. My challenge has been when I get an opportunity to do something, I kind of feel obligated to do it. And, sometimes it's because I'm a Black woman and I might never get this chance again. Or, I'm a young professional and this is my chance to kind of step up and shine. And then sometimes that obligation is just so heavy, like I have to do it because, if I don't, someone walking in my footsteps might have the opportunity to do it as well. So one of the things I try to do when I feel like, things are just becoming too much, I try to recommend someone else to do it. That, somebody in my, network, hey, I think this opportunity would be great for this person, or actually this will be a good idea for this person to kind of step up and lead in this role. So I try to, extend the opportunity to someone else. But I know sometimes coming from a diverse background, you feel that obligation and it's heavy to be able to just, do it and show up and kind of, do it for the culture, like people would say. But yeah, it's a challenge, but you definitely have to learn when to say no and stick to your guns.
Great. Thank you, Natasha. Anything else to add from anyone on that topic before we move on?
I just wanted to say thank you for saying that, Natasha, because it's an important point, because you're always part of something bigger. If you're being asked to do something, it's because someone has recommended you, or you've been noticed, or you've had enough exposure, and there's others that might not. So I'm really glad that you said that.
No, I couldn't agree more. And one thing I wanted to just add on to, to Jen's point earlier too, I think, whether you're saying yes or no to something, I think, rationalizing it internally before you say what the answer is externally, I think is going to, help so much too, because it's going to make, whether you're doing it or not doing it, the work product is going to be totally better once you're fully committed and on board. So I just wanted to highlight that top, because I think, Jen, I think you hit that one totally on. So really appreciate everybody's comments there. We're going to move a little bit on. If you're not ready to throw in the towel, how do you navigate a work environment that's not working for you? The exciting question. Natasha, do you want to kick us off there?
Sure. This actually is a great question because I have been in plenty of work environments that were not working for me. I'm lucky now that I'm at a wonderful organization where I feel supported and empowered. But to get through those times, while I'm trying to figure out my next move, is really to just focus on things that I love. So I love writing. So, I would find opportunities to write articles. At one point I did a podcast. I create videos. I just do things that spark my interest since I'm not getting fulfilled at work. And I feel like, those type of things, make me happy. So that's what I stick to when working in those environments, and just making sure that I'm leaning on my circle to stay motivated, to stay, inspired, because it can get tough and it can get you down if you feel like you're in a work environment that's just not working for you. And it gives you an opportunity to figure out what don't you want going forward. So the next job you get, when you're interviewing, make sure that you were interviewing the organization as well, so you won't put yourself back in that same place. But yeah, just for me, it's just diving into things that I love outside of work, just to keep me motivated, happy, and fulfilled.
That's great, Natasha.
Yeah, the one thing I'll add to that is, some of the work that I am now doing on my own, I asked my former employer if I could do something similar within the company. I work for an AMC, and it just wasn't in their strategic plan as a company. It wasn't something that they were willing to really support. Luckily, I still have a great relationship with them. I still do work for them. One of my clients is still, the administrative contract is still there. So it wasn't something that, created a real rift. And there's a level of support there because now I'm doing something that they don't do. It's almost complementary. But that being said, if you're in that situation where you're completely demotivated because it's already too far gone, I would just make sure your employer knows how you feel, right? If they're the type of person that's going to fire you on the spot for asking for development in the role, I mean, that is more writing on the wall than I can even say. But if you go and you say, I'm feeling unmotivated, I would like this type of working environment, the culture, you have to be honest. I mean, even the people that feel that you're completely in the wrong, you're going to be ringing in their head for some time because they're going to realize that you have some truth to what you're saying. But give them the opportunity to provide you what you need. If they feel that you're that valuable, they'll make those changes. But again, then the writing's on the wall. But I'll also say, in terms of what Natasha said, to support that, focus on what about the job it is. Some people say, I'm at this job because I make a lot of money and I can support my family. You don't want to be in a place that makes you miserable, but if you're that happy with the pay and the type of life that you can provide for your family, it's something you should focus on. If you're there because there are certain parts of the job that make you really satisfied, or there's certain committees you like to work with, or certain people, you have to do your best to try to focus on those things to try to drown out the negative. That being said, I would venture to guess nobody on this call, or really anybody, can say they love their job 100%. So you have to decide what's your percentage that you're willing to deal with, right? Because we would all just probably prefer to be independently wealthy and their job be philanthropy instead, or a professional traveler or something. So you have to also just determine what's your ratio, what's your satisfaction ratio.
And that ratio is key, because I'm willing to bet we've all stayed at a job thinking we can make it work. And, if we just tweak this or change how we approach X, it's going to be great. And it's going to be an environment that we can really thrive in. So being aware of that ratio and knowing when it's time to kind of move on is important as well, because the longer you stay in that situation, which may not be a good fit for you, but is probably a fabulous fit for somebody else, because we all need different and want different things out of a job. It's good to at least start looking and move on, because the longer you kind of sit, it's harder to keep that positive outlook, Natasha, that you were talking about, by like writing or blogging. Or I really invested myself into ASAE and started to volunteer. It only gets you so far. So you kind of have to know when it's time to move on as well.
And I want to make one more point. Another thing in dealing with a tough work situation is having the mindset of, what am I supposed to learn here? I think you can use it as a growing opportunity to get you to the next level, like, dealing with difficult colleagues. You can learn about crucial conversations. So in your next job, you can be able to have those conversations more effectively, or, just how to navigate, because, any job you're going to go to, you're going to run into challenges. So I think using it to grow. So instead of going through it, you're growing through it. I think that's also a great opportunity when dealing with these situations.
No, that's great. Thank you, everyone. And I do think that, a lot of the comments you all made, they're so applicable in any industry. I think especially, in the association world, because, I'm sure it's the same with all of our panels here. Everyone I talk to, within ASAE and just within our companies, everybody wears so many different hats within their organization, and finding the right hats, I think, is super important that you like, because that's going to help you develop down the road. So I think everybody teed that conversation up really well. Any other final comments on that topic before we move on? Great. Just a reminder, if anybody does have any questions, feel free to just shoot it in the chat and we can definitely weave that in. As a YP, how do we create a supportive environment and foster more teamwork? I'm going to hand this over to all of you, but Jen, do you want to kick us off there?
Sure. Something that I used to teach back in the day, and something that I really worked to kind of impart upon my students, was it doesn't matter where you are within an organization, you can still have a huge impact on the culture of that organization. Because at the very least, you work in a microcosm within the organization that you can very easily impact. Some easy, quick ways that you can do it is, when we used to be in the office, it was really easy to stop by someone's desk, kind of share a bit about what you were doing, what your weekend was like, and things like that. As corny as it sounds, really putting reminders in your calendar to touch base with people within your company, whether it's through chat or a phone call or an email, because I don't know about you guys, but 4 o'clock can come around and I'll pick my head up from my email and be like, you know what, I really actually haven't had a real conversation with like any of my coworkers today. So for me, I need that reminder. And that is something that kind of helps foster those connections. Like Tom, I work in an AMC, so I have my colleagues work on different clients. Something that I've found has been really helpful too is kind of expanding it beyond my immediate team to reach out. We had a couple new hires come on, and maybe doing a walk and talk lunch phone call where there's no video, but we're getting outside, and coming up with non-work items to talk about is always helpful. And then really, once you've established those relationships, keeping an ear to the ground as to who's feeling kind of stressed out and offering to help them out. If you can, even if it's just listening and giving someone that space to vent, can be helpful. And you need those even in a virtual environment.
Totally agreed. Natasha, you want to weigh in next?
Yeah, so this has also been something that I have struggled with a little bit, because if anyone has gone to grad school and you get a bunch of group projects and you totally hate your group, luckily at work, it's not like that. Everyone is kind of, trying to reach that same goal. And I think, I just have to come into it as, I don't know it all. I need to kind of open up myself to learn from others as well. So if someone, does marketing really good, I'll reach out to them on something that I'm working with. So I make sure to kind of break down those silos and reach outside of, my scope of business that I do. Also, I just really take the time, like Jen said, to get to know my colleagues. At my job, we do this thing called Donuts and Details, where we get to meet with a different person at our organization just for like 15 minutes, just to discuss anything non-work related. Of course, we've been doing this in a virtual environment, and it's been really great because everyone is, excited to get back to work and actually meet these people in person. But just finding opportunities where, you can break down those walls and collaborate on things that you might not necessarily have, had your hand in or work in. So I think it's just, stepping outside of your comfort zone to get to know people.
Yeah, the what I'm hearing, that concept is really some level of vulnerability. Now, of course, you're not going to completely expose all of your feelings at work, but again, you're not at work just to, and some people maybe just to provide a job description or just to provide a service. But wouldn't it be nice if your employer remembered your birthday or remembered your work anniversary? But in terms of teamwork, I really support the idea of trying to notice what your team members do well and trying to filter the work of what they do well, because it's far more motivating for them giving credit where credit deserved is really important. I've served as executive director of a number of groups over the past decade or so, and I refuse to ever take credit for something that might look good for the organization. And since I run the organization, I get credit. I refuse to take credit if it was someone else's idea, someone else's work. I will always make sure that someone else gets credit. And that makes a huge difference. Too many people I know have left jobs because they say, I do this work and someone else slaps their name on it. It still reflects well on you as a leader, the fact that you can oversee this and notice a strength in somebody. So making sure that in terms of teams, you're always giving credit where credit is due. But I also think regular check-ins that you almost overestimate how much time you may need in a meeting because you know that there's going to be chit chat, right? My brother's looking for daycare for his nephew. And this morning I had a meeting with one of my staff at one of the AMCs. And she said, oh, I know a lot of daycares in that area. We just talked about it for 15 minutes. I was able to get my brother some information, but we had an hour meeting. Our meeting was only really 30 minutes and we were able to just catch up on life. But it's nice because we can always follow up on those items and you get to know each other. So that's really important. So focus on strengths, give credit where credit's due. That's just a good leadership trait to have, as it is a good team member trait to have. A great practice overall because people like to be recognized for what they do. And then if you're leading the team, really make sure that you're organizing it in such a way where people don't want to be left out or miss a deadline. Manage it in such a way where you know that it will perhaps reflect poorly on you as well, and they don't want to disappoint you, right? So it's not a matter of fear; it's just a matter of this team is one unit, and I want to make sure that I'm not breaking that unit.
That's great. Thanks, Tom. No, I think a well-placed kudos, I think works great on both ends, both from the leader and the employee, I think as well. Anything else to add on that topic? Then we'll transition. We do have an audience question that I think you'll all be hearing this for the first time, so I'll give you a second to think about it. But in an interview, how do you effectively ask about the company's culture and receive a real response? It can be a challenge to understand if you will fit within a company during a short interview. Obviously, that's just expedited even more given virtual environments. But curious if any of you have a weigh in on this topic.
Well, that was what my session was about, and I think that an employer, it's hard to really tell how true, how honest they're being, right? Because they may feel the same way about the interviewee, right? Are they really gassing up how well they know a system or a process or their experience? But I think doing the homework about the organization before you get there is actually more key to see if it aligns with how they answer. But I don't know if anyone's on TikTok or the Reels on Instagram, but there's a couple like millennial at work accounts, and they do like decoding. So if it says something like, we all work really hard, but we play hard. And what that really decodes as is, no, actually you all work really hard and you're not paid as much as you should be paid. And, they like decode all of that. But, culture I think is important. And I think the question should really be, what would your staff say about the culture? Not what you think about the culture. What would my colleagues say if I asked them about the culture and you weren't in the room and it was a confidential question? I think that's almost a better way to ask it because, they may be a little bit more honest about it. But there's, if you look at the presentation that we put on YouTube, there's some other ways to sort of vet it. Do you know anyone that's worked there before? Do you see, if you go on LinkedIn, do you see a lot of staff turnover? And if you do, what are the positions that turn over a lot? And are they the ones that are more like junior or mid-management? And is that what you're going for? And you should think about that. Glassdoor is a great place to look. Sometimes Glassdoor is more like you're going to complain. But it gives you an idea of what the organization might be offering in terms of culture. But I also think that the compensation package and the employee benefits tells a lot about culture. One of the things is when I was having my child, my first child, my only child, our company had no maternity leave policy and certainly didn't have a paternity leave policy. And of course, I wasn't the one giving birth and needing to heal and going through all of the hormonal changes in the postpartum, but I still wanted time to bond with my child and I still wanted all that as well. So I created my own paternity leave and didn't really give anyone a choice. But that being said, there's a lot to look at in terms of what are they offering their employees and what does that culture mean? My younger sister is 25 and she's getting this job offer and she's really excited about it. And I'm sorry if any employers on here, but they said 2 weeks vacation. And I was like, that is not enough time off. I'm sorry. I mean, 2 weeks for an entire year, she's going to take the job and she's happy about it. But there's just certain things about the culture that you can tell in terms of what they're offering, because if they really want to care about your well-being and they really want to care about you as a staff person and having both a life at home and a life at work, they're going to make sure that compensation package and the benefits are pretty robust.
Yeah, and I would add too, if you have the opportunity, whether in person or virtually, and more than one person's interviewing at the same time, see how those two people interact. I've been interviewed by 2 or 3 people, and sometimes you see one person kind of really taking the lead and steamrolling their co-interviewer when they're asking your questions. And other times it's a really good rapport and people are just bouncing off really organically. And that can give you kind of a peek into how they operate as a team. But again, I think too, Tom, the decoding is also helpful. I think if anyone's ever heard the term of we're like family, sometimes you have dysfunction. So just being aware of the common terms people use to kind of cover certain cultural blips is good to know.
Yeah, and I think you both summed it up pretty well. I guess the only thing that I would add in regards to that, when I started my position, it was very important for me to be able to have, professional development and know that the employer is going to invest in my growth. So that was very important to me. And even like checking in, like what type of wellness plan do you have? What type of wellness opportunities do you offer? So like my job, when we were in person, we had like boot camp that was offered. We have, wellness stays. We had COVID leave when we were going out to get our vaccine. So just making sure that all of these things are in place outside of, the work and everything like that. But how are you taking care of my well-being and my mental wellness? That was very important.
No, I think those comments were all great. And I just the one thing I guess I would just add to, I've never really been a proponent of asking the culture question. I think that you can kind of get at it a few different ways. And I was happy that I learned this in grad school prior to applying for jobs. But the question I've always liked is just why is the person that was immediately preceding me in the role, why are they leaving? And I think you could tell a lot from the person's answer, even just from their facial expression, because if they're holding back an eye roll or, if they're, I think you could tell if it's a fake answer kind of pretty quickly, which shows a lot about their, relationship with the previous person. So I think it's kind of a sneaky question where you can kind of get a couple different answers there. Why did they actually leave? And then what was, how's the relationship dynamic between the 2 people or 3 people if there's multiple people there.
And I just, sometimes we go, especially as younger people, we go into these job interviews and we may not portray it, but there's a little bit of desperation. I really want this job, right? It's more money, or it's a promotion, or it's a new title. And I've been a huge advocate for this for a long time. You truly are interviewing them too. And as much as that may have sounded cliche for a long time, think about being stuck in a job that you don't like. Think about being stuck in a job that you don't think the employer really cares about you. And so it's okay to ask those questions, and they should be prepared to answer them. And our field is small. Our industry is small. I mean, we have a lot of associations. There's a lot of people that work in this space, but the communities are really small. So, if an employer really does an employee wrong, you're probably going to hear about it. And so I think as an employer, most of us likely will be supervisors or leaders in the future. I think it's going to be really important for us to know that question should come to us as interviewers. And we should be prepared to answer that and have created a positive culture that people do want to work in.
No, I couldn't agree more, Tom. I think that's super important. Anything else to weigh in there? So I know we're getting pretty close to the top of the hour, so I just want to be conscious of everyone's time. So just before we adjourn, I'll just go, we'll go around the horn again. just giving the three of you an opportunity, just any final key takeaways or, one important tidbit you want to leave the attendees with before we adjourn. I'll start with you, Jen.
Sure. I just want to really reinforce that, wellness and finding a good balance is not a one size fits all. So if you do reach out to a coworker or a peer in the association space and they share their experience and you're listening to, wow, that works really well, but I don't see that working in my personal life, be okay with that. Really learn to kind of personalize your wellness plan, because without doing that, you'll just be trying so many things and end up in like a stress spiral as a result of trying to achieve wellness. So really just being true to yourself when you're seeking out what works best.
Great. Natasha?
Yeah, my advice would be to speak up. Don't be afraid to let your organization know what you need to be successful. If you need extra time, if you need to be able to, work from home or whatever the case may be, just be sure to speak up. Also, as I talked about in my video, lean on your circle. You have people in your life that can help you, whether it's, family and friends or even your colleagues. Just make sure that, you use them to help you get to where you need to be and support you on your journey. So speak up and ask for help when you need it.
Great. Mr. Cote.
Just two quick things. One is, control what you can control. And so if work is not one of those places of satisfaction, motivation, and of value to you, but you're going to stay or there's reasons that you don't want to leave, make sure you can control what you can, right? So control the breaks that you have or the time in which you can work, and then control your home life. Try to unplug. Social media is just a director's cut of everyone's life. Your life is just as perfect as everyone else's or just as non-perfect as everyone else's. So just, make sure to remember what you control, what you can. The other thing I keep trying to drive home is if an employer or an organization has learned nothing from the pandemic, then that's a problem. The pandemic has really taught us all something, organizations, technology, individuals, families. So I really challenge you all to think about what you've learned. Does it align with what your organization has learned? And really what the future of that means for your relationship with your employer and your relationship with your career and your job and the type of work that you do. So I get concerned sometimes and think that there are so many things are just going to go back to the way they were before because that's what's comfortable. But I think those that really do learn lessons and make changes and are far more progressive are going to be those that thrive after this. So make sure you learn something.
Great. Couldn't agree more. Well, thank you, Jen. Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Tom, as well. You really just thank you for sharing all your insights and experiences on this month of topics. And thank you to our audience for participating, I should say, today's discussion. Remember to follow ASA Young Professionals on our various social media platforms for more information on future discussions in our weekly Quick Bite Wednesday videos. I think Michael actually in the chat posted all the links to this past month of videos. So obviously go ahead and check those out if you haven't already. But we hope to join us again on our next live discussion, Mentoring in a Virtual Environment. Our speakers for next week are going to be Alexis Redmond, Christina McCoy, Christina Rowe, and John Losh. And so I really appreciate everybody joining, and I hope you have a great rest of the week.